The shot echoed across the Nevada desert like thunder. Every head at Blackwater Ridge Shooting Complex turned toward Lane 17, where a woman with surgical scars mapping her left arm had just put 5 rounds through a single hole at 300 yards. The laughter that had filled the air moments before died instantly. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Commander Jake Sullivan of SEAL Team 6 froze mid-conversation, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his lips. His eyes locked onto the figure adjusting her scope with mechanical precision. The scars, the stance, the impossible accuracy, it couldn't be. She was supposed to be dead. "That's Ghost Zero," he whispered, and the words hung in the desert air like a death sentence. 3 hours earlier, Maya Chun had pulled her beat-up Honda Civic into the dusty parking lot of Blackwater Ridge, the premier shooting facility 40 miles outside Las Vegas. The morning sun painted the surrounding mountains in shades of gold and crimson, but Maya barely noticed the beauty. She had driven through the night from Phoenix, running on nothing but black coffee and a desperate need to feel the familiar weight of a rifle in her hands. The scars on her left arm caught the sunlight as she gathered her gear from the trunk. A weathered rifle case, a small bag of ammunition, and shooting glasses that had seen better days. The pink and white tissue stretched from her shoulder to her wrist in an intricate web of surgical repairs, the result of an IED explosion in Syria that had officially ended her military career 18 months ago. Maya had been Sergeant First Class Maya Chen then, a sniper with the 1st Infantry Division who could thread a needle at 600 yards. The Army doctors said she was lucky to keep the arm. The discharge papers said she was no longer fit for active duty. Maya knew they were both right, but that didn't make the transition to civilian life any easier. She pushed through the glass doors of the facility, immediately hit by the familiar smell of gun oil and the distant pop of small arms fire. The reception area buzzed with weekend warriors and serious competitors preparing for the monthly precision rifle match. Maya approached the counter where a young clerk with marine tattoos covering his forearms looked up from his paperwork. "First time at Blackwater?" he asked, taking in her modest gear and civilian clothes. "Just need a lane for a few hours," Maya replied, sliding her cash across the counter. "Something with distance capability. We've got a 600-yard range open, lane 17. You competing in today's match?" Maya shook her head. "Just practicing." The clerk handed her a range card and safety briefing sheet. "Match starts in 2 hours if you change your mind. Entry fees $50, but the winner takes home a $1,000 Night Force scope." Maya thanked him and headed toward the firing line, her boots crunching on the gravel path. The facility was impressive, a sprawling complex of shooting bays, training courses, and equipment shops that catered to everyone from weekend hobbyists to professional operators preparing for deployment. She'd heard about Blackwater Ridge during her recovery at Walter Reed, where other wounded warriors spoke of it in reverent tones as a place where skills mattered more than uniforms. Lane 17 sat at the far end of the precision rifle range, isolated from the busier sections where tactical teams ran training drills. Maya preferred solitude. She set up her equipment with practiced efficiency, unfolding a small shooting mat and arranging her ammunition with the methodical care of someone who had learned that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. Her rifle was nothing special, a Remington 700 in .308 that she'd bought used from a gun shop in Phoenix. The scope was older than she was, but she'd spent hours calibrating it until she knew its quirks better than her own heartbeat. It wasn't the custom precision weapon she'd carried in combat, but it would serve her purpose. Maya settled into her shooting position, feeling her body remember movements that had once been as natural as breathing. The stock fit against her shoulder. Her cheek found its place on the rest, and her scarred left arm supported the rifle's weight despite the doctor's predictions that she'd never regain full function. Through her scope, the targets at 300 yards appeared as crisp white circles against the sandy backstop. Maya controlled her breathing, let her heart rate settle, and began the mental checklist that had guided her through countless missions: wind speed, humidity, barrel temperature, target assessment. Look at Annie Oakley over there. The voice carried clearly across the morning air, followed by muffled laughter from the group setting up in the neighboring lanes. Maya kept her focus downrange, but her jaw tightened imperceptibly. Think she knows which end the bullets come out of. More laughter. Maya had heard it all before, in training, in combat zones, and especially during her recovery. The assumption that her scars made her weak, that her gender made her less capable, that her civilian clothes marked her as an amateur. She chambered around and took her first shot. The bullet punched through the target's X-ring with surgical precision. Maya worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, and chambered another round without lifting her eye from the scope. The second shot landed millimeters from the first. Lucky shot, someone said, but the laughter had taken on a nervous edge. Maya continued her string of fire, each bullet finding its mark with mechanical consistency. 5 rounds, 5 holes clustered in a group smaller than a quarter. She cleared her rifle, set it aside, and walked downrange to check her target. The group of shooters in the adjacent lanes had gone quiet, their own practice forgotten as they watched Maya examine the neat cluster of holes in the target center. When she returned to her firing position, their whispered comments had shifted from mockery to speculation. Maybe she's military. Those scars look like shrapnel damage. No way she's active duty. Look at that rifle, it's a pawn shop special. Maya ignored them and reset her target, this time at 400 yards. The added distance would separate the skilled shooters from the pretenders, and she wanted to see how much of her edge she'd truly lost during the long months of recovery. And civilian life. The morning sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the range. Maya worked through her ammunition with methodical patience, each shot a small victory against the doubts that had plagued her since leaving the army. Her scarred arm held steady, her breath control remained solid, and her mental game showed no rust despite the extended layoff. By the time she moved her target to 500 yards, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, drawn by the consistent sound of her rifle and the whispered reports of her accuracy. Maya was aware of their attention but remained focused on the task at hand. Shooting had always been her sanctuary, the one place where the chaos of the world reduced to simple mathematics and muscle memory. At 500 yards, the targets became mere specks against the desert backdrop, visible only through the magnification of her scope. Maya adjusted for the increased distance and the subtle crosswind that had picked up as the day warmed. Her first shot at the new range struck the target's 9-ring, close, but not the precision she demanded of herself. She made a minor adjustment to her scope and fired again. This time the bullet found the X-ring. The third shot landed beside, and the fourth opened up the group slightly as fatigue began to affect her form. Maya was preparing for her 5th shot when she heard the approaching footsteps. She didn't look up from her rifle, but her peripheral vision caught the movement of someone taking position in the lane beside her. The newcomer moved with the quiet confidence of a serious shooter, setting up equipment that looked distinctly more professional than the gear she'd seen from the earlier group of mockers. "Mind if I share the range?" The voice was calm, professional. Maya glanced over and saw a man in his early 40s wearing tactical pants and a polo shirt that did little to hide his military bearing. His hair was cropped short, his posture spoke of years of discipline, and his eyes held the steady gaze of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. "It's a public range," Maya replied, returning her attention to her rifle. The man nodded and began setting up his own equipment, a custom precision rifle that probably cost more than Maya's car. paired with optics that belonged in a museum of military technology. Despite the disparity in their gear, he showed no condescension or judgment, simply going about his preparations with professional efficiency. Maya took her 5th shot, completing another tight group that would have impressed her instructors back at sniper school. She was reaching for her spotting scope when the man beside her fired his first round. The shot was good, very good, but not exceptional. "Nice shooting," he said, nodding toward her target. "Military?" "Was," Maya replied. Simply. "Same here, Navy." Maya nodded but didn't elaborate. She'd learned during her recovery that war stories were often more burden than bond, and she wasn't ready to trust this stranger with the details of her service or the circumstances that had brought her to this remote range on a Saturday morning. They shot in companionable silence for the next hour, each focused on their own targets and techniques. The man's shooting was competent and consistent, the work of someone who had received professional training and maintained his skills through regular practice. Maya's shooting was something else entirely, a display of precision that transcended mere marksmanship and entered the realm of art. When Maya moved her target to 600 yards, the maximum distance available at Blackwater Ridge, the man paused in his own shooting to observe. Through her scope, the target had shrunk to little more than a white dot, barely visible against the heat shimmer rising from the desert floor. At this distance, factors like wind speed, humidity, and even the rotation of the earth began to affect bullet trajectory in measurable ways. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya made her calculations with the quiet confidence of someone who had engaged targets at distances where missing meant lives lost. Her first shot at 600 yards struck the target's 8 ring, a respectable shot that would have earned praise at most shooting competitions. Her second shot found the 9 ring. Her third shot punched through the X ring with authority. That made the man beside her look up from his own rifle. Maya chambered her 4th round, settled behind her scope, and began the familiar ritual of breath control and trigger squeeze. This shot would determine whether her long-dormant skills had truly returned, or if she was simply experiencing a brief flash of her former ability. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and 600 yards away, her bullet found the exact center of the target. The bullet's impact resonated across the range like a gavel strike. Maya Chen had just placed 4 consecutive shots into a group no larger than a silver dollar at 600 yards, using equipment that most professionals would consider inadequate for half that distance. The man in the adjacent lane lowered his expensive rifle and stared openly at her target through his spotting scope. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. Maya cleared her rifle and stood, stretching muscles that had grown stiff during the intense concentration required for long range precision work. The morning sun had climbed higher, and the Nevada heat was beginning to build across the desert floor. She could feel sweat trickling down her back beneath her simple cotton t-shirt, but her hands remained steady as she began packing her equipment. "You competing in the match?" the man asked, his tone carrying newfound respect. Maya shook her head while wrapping her rifle in its worn case. "Just practice." "That wasn't practice. That was a master class." He extended his hand. "Tom Morrison. By the way, I run tactical training courses for law enforcement." Maya hesitated before accepting the handshake. "Maya, look, I don't mean to pry, but I've been shooting competitively for 15 years. And I've never seen anyone put up numbers like that with a setup like yours. Where did you train?" "Here and there," Maya replied, shouldering her rifle case. She'd perfected the art of deflection during her recovery, learning to redirect conversations away from her military service and the circumstances that had ended it. Tom Morrison wasn't easily deterred. "I'm guessing the Army, based on your shooting stance and the way you work that bolt. Special operations?" Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The civilian world was full of people fascinated by military service, especially the secretive units that operated in shadows and made headlines. They wanted stories, war trophies, confirmation that the movies got it right. Maya had learned to disappoint them quickly. Infantry, she said simply, which was technically true but revealed nothing of substance. Infantry doesn't produce shooting like that, Tom pressed. That's sniper school training, and not just basic level. That's advanced placement, long-range interdiction work. Maya was saved from responding by a commotion from the main shooting complex. Raised voices carried across the desert air, followed by the distinctive whine of high-performance vehicles approaching at speed. 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking area, their government plates and tinted windows, announcing official business even before the occupants emerged. Tom Morrison's expression shifted to professional alertness. Training exercise, he explained. To Maya, we get military units out here regularly for specialized programs. Today's group is supposed to be Navy SEALs running counter-sniper scenarios. Maya watched as figures in tactical gear began unloading equipment from the vehicles. Even at distance, their movements spoke of elite training and operational experience. She recognized the efficient, purposeful way they organized their gear and established fields of fire. These weren't weekend warriors or even regular military. They were operators from the highest levels of the special operations community. I should go, Maya said, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention her shooting had drawn and the arrival of active military personnel. The last thing she needed was someone from her past recognizing her, or worse, asking questions about why a supposedly disabled veteran was outperforming active duty operators. Wait. Tom pulled a business card from his pocket. I run Precision shooting courses for civilians and law enforcement. Advanced stuff, the kind of training that costs departments $5,000 per student. I could use an instructor with your skills. Maya took the card but didn't commit. I'm not looking for work. The pay is good, and you'd be working with people who understand what precision shooting really means. Think about it. Maya nodded noncommittally and headed toward the parking area. She wanted to be gone before the SEAL unit began their training, and potentially recognized her abilities as something more than civilian hobbyist shooting. The desert heat shimmered off the asphalt as she loaded her gear into the Honda's trunk. Eager to put distance between herself and Blackwater Ridge, she was climbing into the driver's seat when she heard her name called from across the parking lot. Not Maya, the other name, the one that belonged to a life she'd left behind in a Syrian hospital bed. Ghost Zero. Maya froze with her hand on the ignition. Only 7 people in the world knew that call sign, and according to official records, 3 of them were dead. She turned slowly and saw a figure approaching from the SEAL vehicles, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who had just solved a puzzle that had been bothering him for months. Commander Jake Sullivan was older than Maya remembered from their brief encounter in Syria, his temples showing gray and his face carrying new lines that spoke of years spent making impossible decisions. He wore civilian clothes now, khakis and a polo shirt, but his bearing remained unmistakably military. His eyes, sharp and calculating, never left Maya's face as he approached. Sergeant First Class Maya Chun, he said when he reached her car, or should I say, the sniper who never existed. Maya kept her expression neutral despite the adrenaline spike that accompanied being recognized by someone from her operational past. I think you have me confused with someone else, Commander. Do I? Jake's smile was thin but not unkind. Because I just watched you put 4 rounds into a group the size of a quarter at 600 yards. And the last time I saw shooting like that was when Ghost Zero saved my team's ass in Aleppo. The memory hit Maya like a physical blow. Aleppo. 18 months ago, when a Navy SEAL reconnaissance team had been pinned down by enemy snipers in an industrial complex on the city's outskirts. Maya had been operating independently, part of a classified program that officially didn't exist, When she intercepted their distress call, she'd spent 6 hours crawling through bombed-out buildings to reach an overwatch position, then systematically eliminated 4 enemy snipers at distances ranging from 400 to 800 meters. The SEAL team had escaped without casualties, and Maya had disappeared back into the shadows before they could properly thank their guardian angel. The IED that ended her career had detonated 3 weeks later during what was supposed to be her final mission before rotation home. That was a long time ago, Maya said carefully. Not that long. And not nearly long enough for skills like yours to deteriorate. Jake glanced toward the range where Maya's target still hung at 600 yards. The tight cluster of holes visible even at distance. The Army says you're disabled, medically retired due to combat injuries. Maya's left arm throbbed as if responding to the mention of her injuries. The Army's assessment is accurate. Bullshit. Jake's tone remained conversational, but his eyes had taken on the intensity that had earned him command of one of the Navy's most elite units. I've seen disabled, Maya. Hell, I've been disabled. Took shrapnel in Kandahar that should have ended my career, but here I am. The only thing disabled about you is your willingness to admit what you're capable of. A maintenance truck rumbled past them toward the range facilities, giving Maya time to consider her response. She could continue denying her identity, climb into her car, and drive away. Jake couldn't prove anything, and even if he could, her service record was classified at levels. That would make pursuing the matter more trouble than it was worth. But something in his expression suggested he wasn't going to let this go easily. What do you want, Commander? I want to offer you a job. Maya blinked, caught off guard by the directness of his approach. I'm not on active duty anymore. Neither is this position. Private contractor work, supporting a training program I'm developing for special operations. Personnel. Advanced marksmanship, counter-sniper techniques, urban engagement protocols. I already got offered a job today, Maya said, thinking of Tom Morrison's business card in her pocket. This isn't teaching weekend warriors how to punch holes in paper. This is preparing operators for the kind of scenarios where missing means Americans die. Jake leaned against her car, his casual posture at odds with the intensity in his voice. How many people do you think can teach what you know? 5, 10 in the entire world? Maya felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. During her recovery, she'd convinced herself that her service was over, that her injuries had freed her from the burden of being responsible for other people's survival. But Jake was right. The skills she'd developed over years of training and combat operations were extraordinarily rare, and there were people whose lives might depend on learning them. The program is based in Colorado Springs, Jake continued. Mountain training facility, fully equipped range complex, and access to resources you can't get anywhere else. 6-figure salary, full benefits, and the satisfaction of knowing you're still making a difference. And if I'm not interested? Jake shrugged. Then you drive away, and I pretend I never saw Ghost Zero putting on a shooting clinic at a civilian range in Nevada. But I think you are interested, because someone with your background doesn't end up at a place like this on a Saturday morning unless they're looking for something they can't find in the civilian world. Maya stared across the desert landscape, watching heat waves distort the distant mountains. Jake was right about her motivations. She'd driven through the night not just to test her shooting skills, but to recapture some sense of purpose that had been missing since her discharge from the Army. The precision shooting had felt good, but it was ultimately meaningless without context or consequence. The program you're talking about, she said slowly. What kind of training scenarios? Urban. Counter-sniper work, primarily. We've had 3 incidents in the past year where military personnel were killed by enemy snipers, in situations where better training might have prevented the casualties. The Pentagon wants a program that can teach operators not just how to shoot, but how to think like the people shooting at them. Maya understood the implications immediately. Counter-sniper work required more than marksmanship. It demanded an understanding of psychology, tactics, and the ability to think several moves ahead of an adversary who was equally skilled and motivated. It was chess played at lethal distances, where the wrong move resulted in body bags rather than lost pieces. How many students? Small groups, 8 to 12 per class. Advanced operators only. SEALs, Delta, Rangers, Marine Special Operations. People who already know how to shoot, but need to understand how to survive against someone like you. The phrase "someone like you" carried implications that Maya wasn't entirely comfortable with. During her active service, she'd been required to maintain operational security about her true capabilities and mission parameters. Very few people knew the full extent of what Ghost Zero had accomplished during her deployment, and fewer still understood the psychological profile required for that level of precision lethality. The students wouldn't know who I am. They'd know you as a civilian contractor with advanced training capabilities. Your military record would remain classified, and your identity would be protected. Jake straightened up from the car. Look, Maya, I'm not going to pretend this is an easy decision. You've been through hell, and you've earned the right to walk away from all of this. But the people I'm trying to train are facing threats that most of them aren't prepared for. They need someone who's been on both sides of the scope. A convoy of military vehicles was approaching from the direction of Las Vegas, their destination clearly Blackwater Ridge and the training exercise that Jake's team was conducting. Maya watched them approach and realized that her simple morning of practice shooting had evolved into something much more complicated. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Jake reached into his pocket and produced a business card that looked remarkably similar to the one Tom Morrison had given her earlier. Call me when you decide. The program starts in 2 weeks, and I'd rather have you on board than trying to find someone else with your qualifications. Which would be impossible, Maya said. Exactly. Jake's expression grew serious. Maya, what happened in Syria wasn't your fault. The IED, the injuries, the way your career ended, none of that diminishes what you accomplished or what you're still capable of accomplishing. Maya felt something crack inside her chest, a barrier that had been holding back months of suppressed grief and anger. Jake couldn't possibly understand the guilt she carried about surviving when others hadn't, about being extracted to safety while local allies remained behind to face retaliation, about trading her military career for medical treatment that had saved her life, but ended her sense of purpose. I'll call you, she said, her voice rougher than she'd intended. Jake nodded and stepped back from the car. For what it's worth, Maya, seeing you shoot today reminded me why we do this work. There are people out there who depend on capabilities like yours, even if they never know it. Maya started her engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Jake Sullivan standing in the Nevada heat watching her departure. In her rearview mirror, she could see him talking into a radio, probably briefing his team about the change in their training schedule that her presence had necessitated. The drive back toward Phoenix gave Maya time to process what had just happened. In the space of a single morning, she'd gone from anonymous civilian to recognized operator to potential instructor for some of the military's most elite personnel. The transition felt surreal, like stepping through a doorway between two entirely different lives. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The offer stands. We need people like you. J.S. Maya deleted the message but kept both business cards, uncertain which direction her life was about to take, but knowing that her quiet, civilian existence had just become considerably more complicated. The apartment in Phoenix felt smaller when Maya returned that evening, as if Jake Sullivan's job offer had somehow expanded her sense of what was possible beyond the cramped confines of her current existence. She set her rifle case in the corner next to a stack of unread mail and unemployment paperwork, then stood at her kitchen window watching the sun set over the sprawling city. Her left arm ached with the familiar throb that accompanied extended shooting sessions, a reminder of the titanium pins and surgical mesh that held her reconstructed shoulder together. The VA doctors had warned her that full mobility might never return, that the nerve damage could worsen over time. Yet today, she'd outshot active military personnel using equipment that belonged in a museum. Maya pulled Jake's business card from her pocket and studied the embossed lettering. Strategic Training Solutions, LLC, Jake Sullivan, Director of Operations. A phone number with a Colorado area code and an email address that revealed nothing about the true nature of his work. Professional discretion wrapped in corporate packaging. Her laptop sat closed on the kitchen table, gathering dust since she'd given up searching job listings that seemed designed for people whose greatest challenge was customer service, rather than calculating bullet drop at extreme distances. Maya opened it now and found herself typing Jake's company name into a search engine. The results were disappointingly sparse. A basic website featuring stock photos of mountain landscapes and generic language about advanced tactical training. Solutions for government and corporate clients. No client testimonials, no detailed service descriptions. Nothing that would help her understand what she'd be walking into if she accepted Jake's offer. Maya closed the laptop and walked to her bedroom closet, where a cardboard box sat on the highest shelf behind her winter clothes. She hadn't opened it since moving to Phoenix, but tonight felt different. Tonight demanded honesty about who she'd been before the explosion changed everything. The box contained fragments of a life she'd tried to leave behind. Commendation letters, signed by generals she'd never met, challenge coins from units whose existence was classified, and a manila folder containing performance evaluations that read like fiction. Exceptional marksmanship capabilities. Demonstrates tactical innovation under extreme pressure. Recommended for advanced operational assignments. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was her most treasured possession, a scope that had been custom-built for her rifle by a German optics company that specialized in equipment for government snipers. The glass was perfect, the adjustments precise to fractions of a minute of angle, and the reticle designed specifically for her shooting style and mission requirements. Maya held the scope up to the apartment's overhead light, watching how the precision-ground lenses focused the illumination into sharp clarity. This piece of equipment had been part of her for 3 years, an extension of her vision that had enabled shots other snipers considered impossible. The Army had let her keep it after her discharge, perhaps recognizing that it would be useless to anyone else. Her phone rang, interrupting her walk down memory lane. The caller ID showed her mother's number from Seattle. "Hi, Mom." "Maya, honey. How are you feeling? I've been worried since you didn't return my call yesterday." Maya's mother had never fully understood her daughter's military service, viewing it as a dangerous detour from the engineering career that Maya's MIT education had prepared her for. The injury had vindicated her concerns while simultaneously breaking her heart, creating a complex emotional dynamic that neither woman knew how to navigate. "I'm okay, just had a busy day." "Are you still looking for work? Because I talked too. Your Uncle Richard and his construction company is expanding their surveying department. The pay isn't great, but it's steady and you could use your technical background." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of well-meaning family members who wanted to help but couldn't comprehend the gap between their suggestions and her reality. Surveying work would utilize her mathematical skills and attention to detail, but it would also be a daily reminder of how far she'd fallen from the precision operations that had once defined her professional identity. "I might have found something," Maya said, surprising herself with the words. "Oh, that's wonderful. What kind of position?" Maya hesitated, knowing that any honest description of Jake's offer would terrify her mother. "Training and consulting. Using my military experience to help with educational programs." It wasn't entirely a lie. but it omitted enough crucial details to qualify as creative truth-telling. That sounds perfect for you, sweetie. When do you start? I haven't accepted yet. Still thinking it over. They talked for another 10 minutes about family news and Maya's father's recovery from knee surgery. Normal conversations that felt surreal after the morning's revelations at Blackwater Ridge. When she finally hung up, Maya realized that her family's expectations had become another factor in her decision-making process. They wanted her to find stability and healing, not return to the world of tactical operations and classified missions. Maya returned to her laptop and opened a new browser window, this time searching for information about recent military casualties from sniper attacks. The results were sobering. Army Rangers killed in Afghanistan by Taliban marksmen, Marines targeted by ISIS snipers in Iraq, Special Forces operators eliminated during urban operations in Syria. Each incident represented tactical failures that better training might have prevented. Jake had been right about the need for advanced counter-sniper instruction. The enemy had evolved, adopting techniques and equipment that matched or exceeded what American forces brought to the battlefield. Traditional military sniper training focused on offensive capabilities, how to eliminate targets at long range. But defensive training, how to survive against equally skilled opponents, remained underdeveloped across most units. Maya understood both sides of that equation better than almost anyone alive. She'd been the hunter and the hunted, the predator and the prey. Her classified missions had required her to think like her targets, to anticipate their movements and counter their strategies. That psychological insight couldn't be taught from textbooks or PowerPoint presentations. It required someone who'd lived it, survived it, and was willing to share the hard-earned lessons. Her phone buzzed with another text message, this one from Tom Morrison. Maya thought more about our conversation today. If you're interested in instruction work, I have connections with several government training contractors. Good money, less pressure than active duty. Let me know if you want an introduction. 2 job offers in one day, both leveraging her shooting skills but in very different contexts. Tom's offer represented the safer path, civilian instruction, predictable schedules, students who would go home to their families each night. Jake's offer meant returning to the world of special operations, where mistakes had strategic consequences and failure could result in body bags on airport tarmacs. Maya poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her small balcony, watching traffic flow along the distant interstate. The city sprawled endlessly in all directions, millions of people living lives that had nothing to do with tactical operations or classified missions. For 18 months, she'd tried to join them, to find satisfaction in ordinary pursuits and civilian concerns. The attempt had been a failure, leaving her feeling disconnected from both her past and her potential future. The truth was that shooting at Blackwater Ridge had awakened something in her that civilian life couldn't satisfy. The precision, the focus, the integration of technical skill and tactical thinking. It all felt like coming home after a long exile. Jake had recognized it immediately, seeing past her civilian clothes and modest equipment to the operator beneath. Maya's laptop chimed with an incoming email. The sender was an address she didn't recognize, but the subject line made her blood run cold. Regarding your activities at Blackwater Ridge. She opened the message with trembling fingers. Miss Chun, my name is Director Sarah Walsh, Defense Intelligence Agency. I believe you had an interesting conversation with Commander Sullivan today. We should meet. There are developments you need to be aware of before making any career decisions. I'll be in Phoenix tomorrow. Starbucks on Camelback Road, 2 p.m. Come alone. SW. Maya read the message 3 times before its implications fully registered. The Defense Intelligence Agency didn't send casual meeting requests to retired soldiers. Their involvement suggested that Jake's training program was connected to something larger and more classified than he'd revealed. It also meant that her identity had been compromised at levels that could have serious consequences for her future. She closed the laptop and finished her wine, trying to process this latest development. In the span of 12 hours, she'd gone from anonymous civilian to recognized operator to potential instructor to person of interest for one of the intelligence community's most secretive agencies. The progression felt like falling down a rabbit hole with no clear landing point. Maya returned to her bedroom and opened the cardboard box again, this time removing a different item, a secured satellite phone that she'd been allowed to keep after her discharge. The device was supposedly deactivated, its encryption keys revoked, and its access to military communication networks terminated. But Maya had kept it charged out of habit, and now she found herself wondering if certain emergency protocols might still function. She powered on the phone and waited for it to establish a connection. The display remained blank for several long minutes, then suddenly came alive with a cascade of missed message notifications. Dozens of them, dating back months. All from the same source code, OVERWATCH-7. Maya single quotes S hands shook as she accessed the messages. OVERWATCH-7 was her former handler, the intelligence officer who'd coordinated her classified missions and served as her only contact with the broader strategic picture. According to official records, their working relationship had ended with her medical discharge. These messages suggested otherwise. The most recent message was dated yesterday. Ghost Zero, acknowledge receipt. Priority Alpha situation developing. Your location has been compromised. Initiate emergency communication protocols immediately. Maya stared at the message, feeling the walls of her civilian life crumbling around her. Priority Alpha meant imminent threat to national security. Emergency communication protocols hadn't been used since her deployment in Syria, and the reference to her location being compromised explained how Director Walsh had found her so quickly. She scrolled through the earlier messages, reading fragments of intelligence that painted a disturbing picture. References to Project Nightfall, mentions of asymmetric sniper threats, and repeated requests for her to return to active consultation status. The final message in the sequence was the most troubling. Multiple assets compromised. Ghost Zero protocols may be required for domestic operations. Maya powered off the phone and sat in the darkness of her bedroom, processing the implications of what she'd just learned. Her quiet civilian life hadn't been as anonymous as she'd believed. Someone had been monitoring her activities, tracking her movements, and apparently planning to reactivate her operational status whether she agreed or not. The meeting with Director Walsh suddenly took on new significance. It wasn't a casual debriefing about her encounter with Jake Sullivan. It was likely an activation briefing disguised as a friendly conversation. The intelligence community wanted Ghost Zero back in service, and they were prepared to use whatever leverage necessary to make it happen. Maya walked to her kitchen window and looked out at the city lights, wondering how many of Phoenix's residents were sleeping peacefully while unaware of the classified operations that protected their comfortable ignorance. She'd been one of those operations for years, a shadow moving through foreign countries to eliminate threats before they could reach American soil. Now it seemed the threats had found their way home, and the people responsible for stopping them wanted her expertise to prevent domestic casualties that could dwarf anything she'd seen overseas. Her phone rang again, this time showing Jake Sullivan's number. Maya, I hope I'm not calling too late. No, I was awake, thinking about your offer. Good. Listen, there's something I should probably mention. The training program I described is real, but it's also cover for something more complex. Are you familiar with the Defense Intelligence Agency? Maya closed her eyes, feeling the last vestiges of her civilian identity slipping away. We should probably have this conversation in person. Agreed. Can you be in Colorado Springs by tomorrow evening? There are people who need to brief you on some recent developments. What kind of developments? Jake's pause stretched long enough to confirm Maya's worst fears. The kind that require someone with your specific skill set. I'm sorry, Maya, but your retirement just ended. Maya looked at her reflection in the kitchen window, seeing not the scarred civilian she tried to become, but the operator she'd never stopped being. Ghost Zero was about to return to active status whether she was ready or not. I'll be there, she said, and meant it. The Starbucks on Camelback Road buzzed with the typical afternoon crowd of Phoenix professionals conducting business over overpriced coffee. Maya arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table with clear sightlines to both entrances and positioning herself where she could observe approaching pedestrians through the large windows. Old habits from her operational days, but they felt natural again after the previous night's revelations. Director Sarah Walsh entered at precisely 2 p.m., her appearance matching Maya's mental profile of a senior intelligence officer. Professionally dressed in a conservative navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio, and moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to wielding authority. She was younger than Maya had expected, perhaps 40, with auburn hair pulled back in an efficient bun and eyes that missed nothing as they swept the coffee shop's interior. Miss Chun? Walsh approached the table directly, no pretense of ordering coffee or maintaining cover as a casual meeting. Director Walsh. Maya gestured to the empty chair across from her. Thank you for making the trip. Walsh sat and placed her portfolio on the table, then studied Maya with the intense focus of someone trained to read people for deception and capability assessment. You look better than your medical file suggested. The Army doctors were pessimistic about your recovery prospects. The Army doctors weren't wrong. I just learned to work within new limitations. Yesterday's shooting demonstration suggests those limitations are less restrictive than reported. Walsh opened her portfolio and removed a tablet computer. Commander Sullivan's after-action report makes interesting reading. 4 consecutive hits at 600 yards using civilian equipment. Most active-duty snipers couldn't achieve those results with military-grade gear. Maya sipped her coffee and maintained neutral eye contact. Commander Sullivan may have been generous in his assessment. Commander Sullivan is many things, but generous isn't one of them. He's also not easily impressed by shooting displays. Walsh activated her tablet and turned it toward Maya. What you see here is classified satellite imagery from 3 locations: Kabul, Mosul, and Damascus, all taken within the past 6 months. The images showed urban landscapes marked by the distinctive damage patterns of precision rifle fire. Maya studied them with professional interest, noting the angles of engagement, the distances involved, and the tactical implications of each shooting position. Enemy snipers, she said. It wasn't a question. Enemy snipers using techniques that match your operational methodology. Extreme range shots, single bullet eliminations, positions chosen for psychological impact rather than tactical convenience. Walsh scrolled through additional images. 14 American military personnel killed, 37 wounded, all by shooters who demonstrate training and capabilities that exceed standard insurgent competence. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the coffee shop's aggressive air conditioning. The targeting patterns shown in the photographs were indeed similar to methods she'd developed during her classified missions, techniques that had never been formally documented or shared with conventional military units. You think someone's teaching my methods to enemy combatants. We think someone who learned your methods is now working for the other side. Walsh leaned forward slightly. Maya, how many people knew the operational details of your missions in Syria? The question hit Maya like a physical blow. During her deployment, operational security had been absolute. Mission briefings involved only her handler. Target intelligence came through encrypted channels, and even her success confirmations were transmitted using codes that changed daily. The number of people with complete knowledge of her methods. and targets could be counted on one hand. 5 people had full operational knowledge, Maya said slowly. My handler, 2 intelligence analysts, a mission coordinator, and the deputy director of the program. Your handler was Captain Marcus Webb. He died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan 8 months after your medical evacuation. The 2 intelligence analysts were civilian contractors working under assumed identities, both found dead in their Arlington apartments last month. Apparent robbery victims. Walsh paused to let the implications sink in. That leaves the mission coordinator and the deputy director. Maya's throat went dry. Who's the mission coordinator? Walsh consulted her tablet again. Lieutenant Colonel David Harrison. Currently assigned to the Pentagon Special Operations Liaison Office. Clean record, exemplary service, no indication of compromise or divided loyalties. And the deputy director? That's where things get complicated. Walsh's expression grew grim. Dr. Elena Vasquez, former CIA analyst, recruited to oversee the Ghost Zero program in 2019. Brilliant tactical mind, fluent in 7 languages, expert in psychological operations. She disappeared from her home in McLean, Virginia, 6 weeks ago. The coffee shops. Ambient noise seemed to fade as Maya processed this information. Dr. Vasquez had been more than her program supervisor. She'd been the architect of Maya's most successful missions, the person who understood the psychological aspects of precision, elimination, and how to leverage fear for strategic advantage. You think she defected? We think she was either turned or eliminated by hostile intelligence services who wanted access to her knowledge of American sniper capabilities. Walsh closed the tablet. Either way, someone with complete understanding of your methods is now working to train enemy combatants in techniques that are getting our people killed. Maya stared out the window at the normal afternoon traffic, wondering how many of the people driving past understood that their security depended on operations they'd never hear about. The weight of responsibility that she'd tried to leave behind was settling on her shoulders again, heavier than before. What does this have to do with Commander Sullivan's training program? Sullivan's program is real, but it's also cover for a more critical mission. We need you to help us identify and neutralize whoever is teaching your techniques to the enemy. Walsh reached into her portfolio and produced a thick manila folder. This contains everything we know about the recent attacks, plus intelligence on potential suspects and operational areas where the enemy snipers are most active. Maya accepted the folder but didn't open it. Why me? There are other qualified operators who could handle this kind of mission, because you developed these techniques. You understand the psychological profile required to execute them effectively. And you can recognize the tactical signatures that distinguish your methods from standard sniper doctrine. Walsh's tone became more urgent. Maya, we've lost 14 people in 6 months. If this continues, we're looking at strategic implications that could affect American operations worldwide. The folder felt heavier than its physical weight suggested. Maya knew that opening it would represent the end of her civilian life and her return to a world where success was measured in enemy casualties and failure meant American body bags. But the alternative, allowing her innovations to be used against her own country, was unacceptable. The mission parameters would be what exactly? Initially, you'd work with Sullivan's training program to prepare operators for the counter-sniper scenarios they're likely to face. Simultaneously, you'd analyze intelligence on the enemy attacks to identify patterns that could lead us to whoever is directing them. Walsh paused. Eventually, you might be required to engage the source directly. Maya understood the euphemism. Direct engagement meant assassination, the kind of precision elimination that had made Ghost Zero legendary among intelligence circles. It meant returning to the role of hunter, stalking human prey across urban landscapes where collateral damage could create international incidents. What's my operational authority? full presidential authorization for necessary actions in defense of American personnel. Rules of engagement will be classified, but you'll have considerable latitude in methods and targeting decisions. The scope of the authorization stunned Maya. Presidential authority meant that someone at the highest levels of government considered this threat serious enough to risk the diplomatic consequences of American assassination operations on foreign soil. I need time to review the intelligence before making a final decision. You have until tomorrow morning. There's a military transport leaving Phoenix Sky Harbor at 0800 hours. If you're on it, we'll consider your acceptance of the mission parameters. Walsh stood and gathered her materials, then paused as if remembering something important. Maya, there's one more thing you should know. The enemy snipers have been using a specific calling card after successful eliminations. They've been carving GZ into nearby surfaces, walls, trees, abandoned equipment. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. GZ, Ghost Zero. Someone wasn't just using her techniques. They were deliberately taunting her, claiming credit for American deaths while invoking her operational identity. They know I'm alive. They know Ghost Zero is alive, and they want you to know they're out there. Walsh's expression was sympathetic but determined. This is personal now, Maya. They made it personal when they started using your call sign to mark their kills. After Walsh left, Maya sat alone in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at the Manila folder without opening it. Around her, Phoenix residents continued their normal routines, ordering lattes, checking email, conducting business meetings that would never involve discussions of assassination techniques or enemy body counts. She finally opened the folder in her car, parked in the shopping center's lot with the air conditioning running. The intelligence photographs were worse than Walsh had indicated. The precision of the enemy shots was extraordinary, but the psychological warfare aspects were what made Maya's stomach clench with recognition. The enemy snipers weren't just killing American personnel. They were doing it in ways designed to maximize terror and demoralization. Shots taken during daylight hours when entire units could witness the elimination. Targets chosen for maximum symbolic impact rather than tactical value. Messages carved into surfaces that American forces would be required to see during evidence collection. Maya recognized the methodology because she'd helped develop it. During her classified missions, psychological impact had been considered as important as physical elimination. The goal wasn't just to remove specific targets, but to create fear and uncertainty that would disrupt enemy operations for weeks afterward. Now, someone was using those same techniques against American forces, and they were signing their work. With her call sign, she drove home through heavy traffic, the folder containing its disturbing intelligence sitting on her passenger seat like an accusation. By the time she reached her apartment, Maya had made her decision. The personal nature of the attacks, combined with the strategic threat they represented, left her no choice but to return to operational status. Maya spent the evening preparing for deployment, a process that felt surreal after 18 months of civilian routine. She packed tactical clothing that had remained unused since her discharge, checked the functionality of equipment she'd hoped never to need again, and wrote letters to her family that she prayed would never be delivered. The secured satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message as she finished packing. Ghost Zero acknowledgement received. Welcome back to active status. Briefing materials attached. Overwatch 7 sends regards. Maya opened the attached files and found detailed intelligence on 3 potential operational areas: Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. The enemy sniper activity was concentrated in urban areas where American forces conducted regular patrols, creating target-rich environments for anyone with the skills and positioning to exploit them. She also found personnel files for the training program she'd be joining in Colorado Springs. 8 operators selected from various special operations units, all with combat experience and advanced marksmanship training. Their mission profiles indicated they'd been chosen not just for their shooting abilities, but for their tactical intelligence and ability to adapt to unconventional threats. Maya studied their photographs and service records, trying to assess their capabilities and potential for the kind of advanced training she'd be providing. They were good, very good, but none of them had experience with the psychological aspects of precision elimination that would be required to counter enemy snipers using her methods. Her phone rang at midnight. Jake Sullivan's number. "I hope you've made your decision," he said without preamble. "I'll be on the transport tomorrow morning." "Good. Maya, I want you to know that what we're asking of you isn't easy, and it's not entirely fair. You've already given more than most people would. Someone's using my work to kill Americans, Jake. That makes it my responsibility to stop them. I was hoping you'd see it that way." His tone carried relief mixed with regret. "The facility in Colorado Springs is fully equipped for the kind of training we'll need to provide. You'll have access to resources that don't exist anywhere else, and the authority to prepare these operators for scenarios that most of them have never imagined." Maya looked around her apartment, taking a final inventory of the civilian life she was abandoning. The unemployment paperwork on her kitchen table, the job listings she'd bookmarked on her laptop, the normalcy she'd tried so hard to achieve, all of it felt like artifacts from someone else's existence. "Jake, when this is over, when we've stopped whoever is teaching enemy forces to fight like Americans, what happens then?" The pause before his answer told Maya everything she needed to know about her future prospects for returning to civilian life. "Let's focus on the mission first," Jake said finally. "Everything else we can figure out later." Maya ended the call and finished her preparations, knowing that Ghost Zero was about to return to active operations under circumstances that would test every skill she'd developed and every lesson she'd learned during her previous deployment. The enemy wasn't just using her techniques, they were challenging her directly, and the stakes had never been higher. The C-130 Hercules transport aircraft climbed steadily through the Arizona morning sky, its cargo bay filled with military personnel and equipment bound for various destinations across the American Southwest. Maya Shun sat in uncomfortable web seating along the aircraft's port side, surrounded by Marines heading to training exercises and Army Rangers returning from leave. None of them paid attention to the civilian woman with scarred arms who carried herself with unmistakable military bearing. Maya used the 3-hour flight to study the intelligence files that Director Walsh had provided, memorizing target patterns and tactical signatures that would help her understand how her methods were being corrupted by enemy forces. The photographs were disturbing enough, but the detailed after-action reports painted an even grimmer picture of American casualties mounting at an unprecedented rate. The enemy snipers weren't just skilled, they were strategically brilliant. They targeted key personnel during critical operations, eliminated squad leaders at moments when their loss would create maximum chaos, and chose shooting positions that forced American units into tactical disadvantages while attempting rescue or evacuation procedures. It was psychological warfare elevated to an art form, and Maya recognized her own innovations being used with lethal effectiveness. Peterson Air Force Base appeared below them as the transport began its descent toward Colorado Springs, the Rocky Mountains rising like granite walls beyond the sprawling military installation. Maya had never been to Peterson before, but its reputation as a hub for space operations and classified programs made it an appropriate location for the kind of training she'd been recruited to provide. Jake Sullivan was waiting at the airfield when she deplaned, wearing a CU camouflage and looking more like the SEAL commander she remembered from Syria than the civilian contractor she'd met at Blackwater Ridge. His expression was serious as he watched her gather her gear, and Maya could see the weight of responsibility that came with preparing operators for missions where failure meant body bags. "Welcome to Colorado," he said, taking her rifle case. "How was the flight?" "Educational." The intelligence files make for disturbing reading. Wait until you see the full briefing materials. What Director Walsh showed you was just the executive summary. Jake led her toward a waiting military vehicle. The training facility is about 20 minutes from here, built into a mountain complex that provides complete operational security. You'll be impressed by the capabilities we have available. They drove through Colorado Springs in silence, Maya, watching the city give way to pine forests and steep mountain roads that wound higher into terrain that seemed designed for the kind of isolated training that special operations required. The landscape reminded her of Afghanistan, all rocky peaks and hidden valleys where entire military units could disappear from observation. The operators you'll be training, Maya said as they climbed toward the tree line. How much do they know about why they're here? They know they're being prepared for advanced counter-sniper scenarios, but they don't know about the intelligence regarding enemy use of your specific techniques. That briefing will come from you, once you've had a chance to assess their capabilities and determine how much classified information they can handle. Maya understood the security protocols involved. The operators would receive information on a need-to-know basis, with the most sensitive intelligence reserved for those who demonstrated both tactical competence and psychological stability. Her job would be determining who among them was capable of understanding the full scope of what they were facing. The training facility appeared suddenly around a bend in the mountain road, its buildings carved into the granite cliff face in a way that made them nearly invisible from aerial observation. Guard towers and defensive positions were concealed among the pine trees, and Maya counted at least 3 different vehicle checkpoints before they reached the main gate. "Welcome to Raven's Nest," Jake said as they passed through the final security barrier. Officially, this is an Air Force Mountain Survival Training Center. Unofficially, it's where we prepare operators for scenarios that don't exist in any manual. The facility was larger than Maya had expected, with shooting ranges that extended deep into mountain valleys, urban warfare training areas built to replicate foreign cities, and technology laboratories that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Personnel moved between buildings with the purposeful efficiency of people engaged in critically important work, and Maya could see the kind of advanced equipment that civilian training centers couldn't afford. Jake parked outside a building that bore no external markings, but was clearly the facility's operational headquarters. "Your briefing starts in 30 minutes. That gives you time to get settled and review the final intelligence updates that came in during your flight." Maya's quarters were Spartan but functional, containing everything she'd need for an extended stay: secure communication equipment, a gun safe for her personal weapons, and a computer terminal with access to classified networks. She unpacked quickly, then sat down to review the intelligence updates that Jake had mentioned. The new information was worse than she'd feared. 3 more American casualties in the past 48 hours, all bearing the tactical signatures that marked them as victims of someone trained in Ghost Zero methodology. The enemy snipers were accelerating their operations, possibly in response to learning that Maya had been reactivated. A knock on her door interrupted her reading. "Miss Chun? Commander Sullivan is ready for you." The briefing room was filled with 8 operators who represented the elite of American Special Operations. Maya recognized their unit insignia: Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force Reconnaissance, and Delta Force. All of them were combat veterans with advanced marksmanship training, but none of them had ever faced the kind of psychological warfare campaign that the enemy snipers were conducting. Jake stood at the front of the room, beside a large screen displaying satellite imagery from recent attack sites. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Maya Chun, our new senior instructor. Ms. Chun has specialized experience in the tactical scenarios you'll be training for, and she'll be leading the advanced portions of your program." The operators studied Maya with professional interest, taking in her civilian clothes and obvious injury history while assessing her. qualifications for training them in techniques they'd need to survive combat operations. Maya was accustomed to skeptical evaluations from military personnel, but she could sense something different in their attention, a wariness that suggested they'd been briefed on the severity of the threats they were preparing to face. "Before we begin tactical training," Maya said, activating the room's presentation system, "you need to understand what you're up against. The enemy snipers you'll potentially encounter aren't standard insurgent marksmen. They've been trained in advanced techniques that most of you have never seen, and they're using those techniques with tactical intelligence that suggests professional military instruction." She clicked the first intelligence photograph, showing the aftermath of a sniper attack in Kabul that had killed 2 Army Rangers during a routine patrol. This elimination was conducted at a range of approximately 700 meters, through a window opening that provided less than 6 inches of target exposure. The shot was taken during daylight hours when the entire patrol could witness the elimination, maximizing psychological impact on surviving personnel. The operators leaned forward as Maya continued through the intelligence photographs, highlighting tactical elements that demonstrated the enemy's sophisticated understanding of how to leverage precision fire for strategic advantage. She could see recognition dawning on their faces as they began to understand the level of threat they were being prepared to counter. "Staff Sergeant Williams," Maya said, addressing a Delta Force operator whose file indicated extensive sniper training. "What's your assessment of the shooting position used in this Mosul attack?" Williams studied the photograph with professional attention. "Elevated position with multiple egress routes, excellent field of fire, and concealment that would make counter-battery fire extremely difficult. Whoever chose this position understood urban warfare doctrine at an advanced level." "Correct. And notice the psychological elements. The target was eliminated while conducting a medical evacuation, forcing his unit to choose between securing the area and treating wounded personnel. The shooter understood that creating moral dilemmas was as effective as physical elimination." Maya continued through the intelligence briefing, watching the operators' expressions grow increasingly grim as they realized the sophistication of the enemy they'd be facing. These weren't random attacks by opportunistic insurgents. They were coordinated campaigns designed to undermine American operational effectiveness through precision psychological warfare. "Ma'am," said Petty Officer Rodriguez, a SEAL sniper, whose service record included deployments to both Iraq and Afghanistan, "the techniques you're describing, they're not standard insurgent doctrine. Someone with professional military training had to teach them these methods." "That's correct, Petty Officer. And that brings us to the classified portion of your briefing." Maya clicked to a new slide showing the Ghost Zero program insignia. "How many of you are familiar with the designation Ghost Zero?" Silence filled the room as the operators exchanged glances. Maya could see that some of them recognized the call sign, probably from rumors that circulated through special operations communities about classified programs and legendary operators whose existence was never officially acknowledged. Ghost Zero was a classified program that operated from 2019 to 2023, Maya continued. The program developed advanced sniper techniques that integrated psychological warfare with precision elimination, creating methods that were specifically designed to maximize strategic impact through individual targeting decisions. She paused, letting the implications sink in before delivering the crucial information that would define their understanding of the threat they faced. The enemy snipers who have killed 14 American personnel in the past 6 months are using Ghost Zero techniques. Someone with complete knowledge of classified American methods is training enemy combatants in psychological warfare tactics that were never intended to be used against our own forces. The room erupted in quiet but intense discussion as the operators processed this revelation. Maya could see anger, determination, and professional concern mixing in their expressions as they realized that, American innovations were being turned against American personnel. Which brings us to your mission, Jake said, retaking control of the briefing. You're going to be trained in Ghost Zero counter techniques, methods for identifying, locating, and neutralizing snipers who are using advanced psychological warfare tactics. Ms. Chen developed these techniques during her operational service, and she's going to teach you how to survive against them. Maya felt the weight of 8 pairs of eyes focused on her with new intensity. The operators were no longer evaluating a civilian instructor. They were looking at someone whose innovations had become a threat to American lives and who represented their best hope for countering that threat. Questions? Maya asked. Sergeant First Class Thompson, an Army Ranger with multiple combat deployments, raised his hand. Ma'am, if you develop these techniques, how do we know the enemy hasn't anticipated the countermeasures you'll teach us? It was an intelligent question that demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking Maya would need from all of them. Because the countermeasures I'll teach you were never documented or shared beyond the classified program. The enemy has the offensive techniques, but they don't have the defensive methods that were developed alongside them. What about the person who's teaching enemy forces? Asked Chief Petty Officer Morgan, a SEAL whose file indicated expertise in urban warfare. Do we have intelligence on their identity or location? Maya exchanged glances with Jake before answering. We have suspects, but no confirmed identity. Part of your mission may involve gathering intelligence that could lead to identifying and eliminating whoever is training enemy snipers in American techniques. The implications of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The operators understood that they weren't just being trained for defensive purposes. They were being prepared for offensive operations that could take them into hostile territory to eliminate a high-value target whose death might be the only way to stop the tactical intelligence leak. When do we start training? Asked Williams. Maya looked at the faces around the room. Seeing the combination of professional competence and personal determination that she'd need to transform them into operators capable of countering their own country's innovations. We start tomorrow morning at 0500 hours. Range work begins immediately, followed by tactical scenarios that will prepare you for psychological warfare techniques that most American forces have never encountered. She paused, making eye contact with each operator. Gentlemen, what you'll learn here may be the difference between coming home alive or coming home in a box. I suggest you take it seriously. The briefing ended with assignment of quarters and equipment issue. But Maya could see that the operators' real processing was just beginning. They'd volunteered for advanced training without knowing they'd be preparing to counter American techniques being used by enemy forces. The psychological complexity of that mission would test them in ways that conventional combat never could. Jake walked with her back to her quarters as the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, casting long shadows across the training complex. How do you think they'll handle it? He asked. Maya considered the question carefully. They're good operators with strong technical skills. But what we're asking them to do, to think like the enemy while knowing the enemy thinks like us, that's going to challenge them in ways they're not prepared for. And you, how are you handling it? Maya looked up at the mountain peaks surrounding their position, thinking about the enemy snipers who were using her innovations to kill American personnel while marking their victories. With her call sign, I'm ready to stop them, she said simply. Whatever it takes. 3 weeks of intensive training had transformed the 8 operators from skilled marksmen into psychological warfare specialists capable of thinking like both predator and prey. Maya stood on the observation deck overlooking Range 7, watching Chief Petty Officer Morgan execute a counter-sniper drill that would have seemed impossible when he'd first arrived at Raven's Nest. The scenario was brutal in its complexity. Morgan had to locate and neutralize a hidden sniper while protecting a simulated casualty evacuation, all while knowing that his opponent was using Ghost Zero techniques designed to force him into tactical mistakes. He moved through the urban warfare course with calculated precision, using cover and concealment methods that Maya had developed specifically to counter her own innovations. Target eliminated. Morgan's voice crackled through the radio as his rifle shot echoed across the mountain valley. Casualty evacuation proceeding on schedule. Maya checked her stopwatch and nodded with satisfaction. Morgan had completed the drill in under 8 minutes, a performance that demonstrated complete integration of the psychological and tactical elements she'd been teaching. More importantly, he'd done it without falling into any of the mental traps that enemy snipers used to manipulate American decision-making. "Outstanding work, Chief," Maya said into her radio. "Report to the briefing room in 30 minutes. Jake Sullivan joined her on the observation deck as the other operators concluded their individual assessments. His expression carried the satisfaction of someone watching a successful program reach completion, but Maya could see underlying tension that suggested new developments. "They're ready," Maya said before he could ask. "All 8 of them have demonstrated competence in counter-sniper techniques, and they understand the psychological warfare elements well enough to train other personnel when they return to their units." "Good, because we just received targeting intelligence from Langley. The CIA has identified Dr. Ilana Vasquez's location, and it's worse than we feared." Maya felt her stomach drop. Dr. Vasquez had been her program supervisor, the person who understood Ghost Zero methodology better than anyone except Maya herself. If she'd been turned by enemy intelligence services, the strategic implications extended far beyond the recent sniper attacks. Where is she? Damascus. Operating under Syrian government protection and apparently running a training program for foreign fighters who are subsequently deployed against American forces throughout the Middle East. Jake handed Maya a tablet displaying satellite imagery of a compound in the Syrian capital. "Intelligence estimates suggest she's trained at least 20 snipers in advanced techniques, with more in development." Maya studied the photographs, recognizing the tactical layout of a professional training facility designed for the kind of specialized instruction that had once been her responsibility. The compound included precision shooting ranges, urban warfare courses, and classroom facilities where psychological warfare theory could be taught alongside practical marksmanship skills. The mission profile? Direct action. Eliminate Dr. Vasquez and destroy the training facility before more enemy snipers can be deployed against American forces. Jake's tone carried the weight of presidential authority. "You'll lead a joint operation with 4 of the operators you've trained, supported by intelligence assets already in country." Maya had been expecting this moment since accepting reactivation. But the reality of returning to operational status still carried emotional weight. She'd spent 3 weeks teaching others to counter her techniques. Now she'd have to use those same techniques in their most lethal form to eliminate the person who'd helped her develop them. Timeline? 48 hours. Military transport leaves tonight for a staging area in Jordan, then helicopter insertion into Syria tomorrow evening. Exfiltration will depend on mission success and tactical conditions. The briefing room filled quickly as the 8 operators assembled for what they sensed would be their final instruction session. Maya could see in their faces the professional readiness that came from intensive training combined with the anticipation of personnel who knew they were about to be deployed on actual missions. "Gentlemen," Maya began, "your training here is complete, but 4 of you will be accompanying me on an operational mission that will test everything you've learned. The target is Dr. Ilana Vasquez, the person responsible for training enemy snipers in Ghost Zero techniques." She activated the briefing room's presentation system, displaying the Damascus compound intelligence that Jake had shown her. "This is a direct action mission with strategic implications. Dr. Vasquez has been training enemy snipers for 6 months, and those snipers have killed 14 American personnel using techniques that I developed for classified operations. The mission is to eliminate her and destroy the training facility before additional enemy operators can be deployed. Staff Sergeant Williams leaned forward in his chair. "Ma'am, what's the tactical assessment of the target's security?" "Syrian. Government protection, estimated squad-level security force, and the possibility that some of her trained snipers are providing overwatch for the compound." Maya clicked to aerial photographs showing the compound's defensive positions. "We'll be operating in hostile territory with limited exfiltration options, which means success depends on speed, precision, and complete tactical coordination." The operators absorbed this information with the professional calm that Maya had come to expect from them, but she could see the recognition of a high-risk mission that would require everything they'd learned during their training. "Who's going?" asked Petty Officer Rodriguez. "Williams, Morgan, Rodriguez, and Thompson. You've demonstrated the highest competence in urban counter-sniper operations, and this mission will require those specific skills." Maya paused, making eye contact with each selected operator. "This isn't training anymore, gentlemen. Mission failure means enemy snipers continue killing Americans using techniques that were developed to protect American interests." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of mission planning, equipment preparation, and final tactical rehearsals. Maya found herself falling back into operational routines that felt both familiar and strange after her extended civilian hiatus. Her scarred arm ached from the intensive weapons handling, but her muscle memory remained intact despite the months of inactivity. The flight to Jordan gave Maya time to review Dr. Vasquez's psychological profile and consider the tactical implications of confronting someone who understood her methods as well as she did. Elena had been brilliant during their collaboration, possessing an intuitive understanding of how psychological pressure could be leveraged for strategic advantage. Now that intelligence would be turned against Maya and her team, the staging area in Jordan was a nondescript military compound that served as a forward operating base for classified missions throughout the Middle East. Maya briefed her team on final mission parameters while intelligence officers provided real-time updates on the target compound security status. "Current intelligence shows normal activity patterns," reported the mission coordinator, a Army major whose nameplate read simply Adams. "Dr. Vasquez maintains regular schedules, with teaching sessions conducted during daylight hours and personal time in the compound's residential sector during evenings." "Security response times?" asked Williams. "Syrian military reaction force estimated at 15 minutes from the nearest garrison. Your window for mission completion and exfiltration is approximately 12 minutes after initial compromise." Maya studied the satellite imagery one final time, identifying shooting positions and escape routes, while calculating the tactical sequence that would give them the best chance of success. The mission would require her to eliminate Dr. Vasquez from long range while her team neutralized security personnel and destroyed the training facilities. "Questions?" Maya asked her team. "Ma'am," said Thompson, "what if Dr. Vasquez tries to surrender? Rules of engagement for prisoner capture?" Maya had been dreading this question. Elena Vasquez possessed intelligence that could be valuable for understanding the full scope of enemy sniper training programs, but she also represented an ongoing threat as long as she remained alive. Mission parameters specify elimination, not capture. Dr. Vasquez has knowledge that makes her too dangerous to risk extraction attempts. The helicopter insertion into Syria proceeded without incident, the aircraft flying low through mountain valleys to avoid detection by Syrian air defense systems. Maya watched the landscape pass below, recognizing terrain features from her previous deployment and feeling the familiar combination of anticipation and dread that accompanied high-risk operations. They landed 2 kilometers from the target compound. As the sun set behind Damascus, providing the darkness necessary for their approach, Maya led her team through urban terrain that felt both familiar and alien, moving through neighborhoods where normal civilian life continued despite the nearby presence of foreign fighters and government security forces. The compound appeared exactly as the intelligence photographs had indicated. A fortified training facility surrounded by concrete walls and guard towers, with enough space for the kind of advanced marksmanship instruction that had been Maya's specialty during her operational career. Maya established her shooting position on a rooftop 400 meters from the compound's main building, setting up her rifle with the methodical precision that had once made Ghost Zero legendary. Through her scope, she could see into the residential quarters where Dr. Vasquez would be spending her evening reviewing training materials and planning the next day's instruction. "Overwatch in position," she whispered into her radio. "Beginning. Target identification." Elena Vasquez appeared at a window exactly as intelligence had predicted, moving with the confident stride of someone who felt secure in her Syrian government protection. Maya centered her crosshairs on the target, calculating wind speed and distance while forcing herself not to think about the personal history that connected her to the woman in her scope. "Target acquired," Maya transmitted. "Initiating countdown." The shot broke cleanly, her rifle bucking against her shoulder as the bullet crossed 400 meters in less than half a second. Through her scope, Maya watched Dr. Vasquez collapse, knowing that the person responsible for perverting Ghost Zero techniques would never train another enemy sniper. "Target eliminated," she reported, already beginning to pack her equipment for EXFILTRAT. ION. The compound erupted in activity as security personnel responded to the elimination of their primary asset, but Maya's team had already begun their withdrawal. Through predetermined escape routes, Syrian military vehicles appeared in the distance, their headlights sweeping through the darkness as they raced toward the now burning training facility. The helicopter extraction proceeded smoothly, lifting Maya and her team out of Syrian airspace before government forces could organize an effective response. As Damascus disappeared below them, Maya felt the satisfaction of mission completion tempered by the knowledge that Dr. Vasquez's death would end only one source of tactical intelligence leaking to enemy forces. "Mission accomplished," she reported. To the command center. "Target eliminated, training facility destroyed." Back at Raven's Nest 3 days later, Maya stood once again on the observation deck overlooking the mountain training ranges. The 4 operators who had accompanied her to Syria were already preparing to return to their units, carrying with them the knowledge and experience that would help protect American personnel from enemy snipers using Ghost Zero techniques. Jake Sullivan found her there as the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, bringing news that made the entire operation worthwhile. "Intelligence reports that enemy sniper activity has dropped by 70% in the past 48 hours, he said. "Eliminating Dr. Vasquez apparently disrupted their training pipeline more effectively than we hoped." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of successful mission completion. "What happens now?" "Now you have a choice. Return to civilian life with the satisfaction of knowing you've protected American lives, or stay active and help us prepare for the next threat that requires your expertise." Maya looked out across the training facility where she'd spent 3 weeks teaching elite operators to counter her own innovations. The work was important, the mission was clear, and for the first time since her injury in Syria, she felt completely aligned with her purpose and capabilities. "I think Ghost Zero still has work to do," she said, and knew that she'd finally found her way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.